Opening the fatal Confidence, March 1943, intelligence room of the Imperial Japanese Navy, Truk Lagoon. An intelligence officer closes a thick report on the table. The red stamp reads, American torpedo threat assessment complete. The conclusion is clear, reassuring, almost arrogant. The American Mark 14 torpedoes are ineffective, defective, harmless. For the past 18 months of war, American submarines had fired hundreds of torpedoes against Japanese ships. Most ran beneath their targets. Many exploded prematurely. Some hit dead-on and failed to detonate. Submarine commanders returned, furious, reporting failure after failure, and Japanese intelligence recorded everything. The conclusion seemed obvious. The United States had entered the war with a broken primary weapon. Their submarines, technically advanced, carried torpedoes that simply didn't work. For Japan, this was an unexpected strategic advantage. Their convoys could sail with fewer escorts. Their supply routes were safer than they should have been. The intelligence reports were thorough, systematic, almost scientific in their certainty. Every failed American attack was documented. Every dud torpedo was noted. Every premature detonation was analyzed. The pattern was undeniable. American submariners were brave. Their boats were excellent, but their main weapon was fundamentally flawed. Japanese naval commanders adjusted their doctrine accordingly. Convoy spacing could be wider. Escort destroyers could be reassigned to other critical duties. Anti-submarine patrols could be reduced. The American submarine threat, while not negligible, was far less dangerous than it could have been with functional torpedoes. In wardrooms across the combined fleet, officers toasted their good fortune. The Americans had handed them an advantage through their own incompetence. Their vaunted industrial might couldn't even produce a working torpedo. But while Japan trusted its own reports, something was changing on the other side of the Pacific, something the Japanese didn't see coming. And when they saw it, it was already too late. The context, the weapon that shamed the US Navy, the Mark 14 torpedo was, on paper, the most advanced submarine weapon in the world. Developed over 15 years of secret research and testing, equipped with a revolutionary magnetic exploder, the Mark 6 influence detonator, designed to detonate beneath the enemy hull, breaking the keel and snapping the ship in half. A direct hit wasn't even necessary. The torpedo just needed to pass underneath. The theory was brilliant. A ship's keel is its spine. Break it, and the vessel's own weight tears it apart. No amount of armor plating on the sides would help. The magnetic exploder would sense the steel hull passing overhead, detonate at the optimal depth, and the resulting bubble pulse would crack the ship's back. Specifications were impressive. Speed of 46 knots, range of 4,500 meters, warhead containing 292 kilograms of torpex, an explosive 50% more powerful than TNT, depth control accurate to within half a meter, gyroscope guidance for straight running. It was a masterpiece of naval engineering. The weapon was so secret that the Navy refused to test it properly. Live-fire exercises with the expensive magnetic exploder were forbidden. Depth tests were conducted with practice heads. The actual combat combination of mechanisms was never validated under real conditions. The Bureau of Ordnance was absolutely confident in the mathematics and engineering. It was the perfect weapon, until it entered combat. December 1941 to mid-1943, American submarines fired thousands of Mark 14 torpedoes. The success rate was catastrophic. Veteran commanders returned from patrol emotionally shattered, swearing they had scored perfect hits and nothing happened. Japanese freighters sailed on untouched. Destroyers continued hunting. Torpedoes ran straight under ships without detonating. Others exploded 15 meters from the target. Some hit and bounced off. The stories became legendary and heartbreaking. Commander Dudley Morton of USS Wahoo watched a torpedo hit a tanker amidships at perfect 90-degree angle and failed to explode. The torpedo fell into the water and sank. The tanker sailed away. Lieutenant Commander Lawson Ramage fired a full spread of 6 torpedoes at a stationary target from 800 meters. All 6 ran true. All 6 hit. 0 detonations. Submarine crews began to dread combat not because of the enemy, but because of their own weapons. The psychological toll was immense. These men risked their lives penetrating Japanese defenses, achieving perfect firing positions, only to watch their weapons fail again and again. Some commanders requested transfer. Others broke down. The submarine force was developing a crisis of confidence. The US Navy denied the problem for months. Tests at Pearl Harbor showed the torpedoes working perfectly. Technical specifications were impeccable. The problem, according to high command, was with the commanders who couldn't aim properly, or were exaggerating, or lying to cover their own incompetence. Some Bureau of Ordnance officers suggested the submarine commanders were simply poor shots, unwilling to get close enough to the enemy. Others implied cowardice. The institutional arrogance was staggering. The math said the weapon worked, therefore the weapon worked. Reality was wrong. But the commanders insisted. They threatened resignation. They demanded investigations. They conducted their own unauthorized tests. And finally, under unbearable pressure, the Navy investigated properly. Problem 1. The torpedo ran 3 meters deeper than set. The magnetic exploder passed too far below the hull to detonate properly. The depth mechanism had never been tested with a full combat warhead, only lighter practice heads. Under actual combat load, the torpedo ran deep. Problem 2. The magnetic exploder was overly sensitive to the Earth's magnetic field in the Pacific. The field strength varied by latitude and proximity to volcanic islands. The exploder would sense these variations and detonate prematurely, sometimes 50 meters before reaching the target. Problem 3. When commanders disabled the magnetic feature and used only the contact exploder, the firing pin bent when hitting the hull at a right angle. The pin was designed for glancing blows at 45 degrees, not perpendicular impacts. It would crumple instead of triggering detonation. 3 failures, 3 layers of disaster. A torpedo that took 15 years to develop and was never properly tested under actual combat conditions. But by mid-1943, engineers finally corrected everything. They adjusted the depth mechanism. They recalibrated the magnetic exploder for Pacific conditions, then disabled it entirely after continued problems. They redesigned the contact firing pin to work at any angle, and nobody warned the Japanese. The turning point, Operation Cartwheel and the doomed convoy, November 1943, Bismarck Sea, between Rabaul and Truk. Japan was under mounting pressure. The Solomon Islands were falling one by one. Rabaul, the fortress of the South Pacific, was under siege by air. MacArthur's forces were advancing up the New Guinea coast. Nimitz's carriers were pushing through the Central Pacific. The Japanese war machine was being squeezed from multiple directions, and it all depended on one thing: fuel. Oil came from one place, the petroleum fields of the Dutch East Indies, now under Japanese control. Palembang, Tarakan, Balikpapan, these refineries were pumping millions of barrels to keep the war effort alive. But the oil did no good sitting in storage tanks in Borneo. It had to reach the fleet. That meant tanker convoys, slow, vulnerable, absolutely critical tanker convoys, sailing thousands of miles from the refineries to forward bases like Truk and Rabaul. Every gallon of aviation fuel, every drum of bunker oil, every barrel of diesel had to make that journey. Without fuel, carriers couldn't launch aircraft, battleships couldn't sail, destroyers couldn't hunt submarines, trucks couldn't move supplies. The entire logistics chain collapsed without petroleum. The convoys were Japan's lifeline, and by late 1943, that lifeline was stretched thin. On November 17, 1943, a critical convoy departed Truk bound for Rabaul. 6 transport ships laden with ammunition, food and reinforcements, 3 tankers carrying aviation fuel and diesel, light escort consisting of 2 old destroyers and a patrol boat. Speed, 12 knots. Route, known and predictable. Following the standard course through the Bismarck Sea, it was a high-priority target. Allied codebreakers at Station HYPO had intercepted the convoy's route. American submarines were vectored to intercept, but Japanese confidence remained high. After all, American submarines had tried to attack convoys before with limited success. The Mark 14 torpedoes had a reputation for failure. The escort was alert but not desperate. Previous convoy battles had seen submarines fire spreads of 6 or 8 torpedoes for 1 or 2 hits. Acceptable losses. They didn't know that 3 American submarines were waiting in ambush along the route. USS Sculpin Commander Frederick Conaway, USS Apaguan Commander W.P. Shoney, USS Runner Commander J.H. Burland. And this time the torpedoes worked. The attack, 11 detonations, 9 ships destroyed, November 18th to 37 hours, total darkness. TotalDarkness.com. See I quarter moon, obscured by clouds. USS Sculpin, running at periscope depth, detected the convoy at 8,000 meters. 6 large contacts on passive sonar. Speed 12 knots. Formation in staggered columns. Commander Conaway raised the periscope for exactly 4 seconds, enough to confirm. 3 tankers, 3 large transports, escorts flanking. He calculated the intercept geometry in his head. The convoy was making 12 knots on a heading of 285 degrees. Sculpin could make 20 knots submerged for short bursts. He needed to get ahead of the formation, position perpendicular to their track, and wait for them to sail into his firing solution.